Well, today is the third Sunday of Easter, and we look at yet another resurrection occurrence. This is actually the last Sunday we'll do that. Next week we're going to be in Good Shepherd Sunday, and it's kind of answering the question, now that we know he's risen from the dead, what is our reply? And one is to be his sheep, and he be our shepherd, and so on. We'll look at those in the following Sundays. But for now, we have this one resurrection appearance, and it takes place at the lakeside up in Galilee. Now, remember, he had appeared to them a number of times down in Jerusalem, to a number of different groups and combinations of folks, including the apostles. And at some point, he's told them, go back to Galilee now, and I'll see you there. Now, remember, too, that his appearances weren't consistent. In other words, he wasn't with them the whole time. He would appear and then disappear. Maybe implied, at least, maybe even a week apart. So there's something here of a mystery, about that. But I think it's going to impact our story. So here we are now. They've come up to Galilee, and we're at the lakeside. And Peter says, he as the scene opens up, we see that I think there's about, if I do the math, 7 of them. So Peter, James, and John. You've got Thomas and Nathaniel, and 2 others. Were unnamed because it's you and me. And Peter says something kind of regrettable. He says, I'm going fishing. And they say, well, we'll go with you. Now that's regrettable because remember the Lord called them away from fishing. No longer shall you be fishing or, catching fish, but I will make you fishers of men and women, see. So I've called you now to something else. So they left their nets and they followed him. And now Peter says, I'm going back to my nets. What's going on here? I mean, he's seen the Lord alive. I mean, on at least arguably 2 or 3, arguably 3 occasions. What's going on? And it could, try to put yourself, we grew up with these stories, right? But they had to live them. And if you saw a friend of yours tortured to death, and their broken body put in a tomb, and all of a sudden they're standing in front of you perfectly alive. What do you do with that? And then they don't just stay the whole time and explain everything. They explain some things, but they don't. Then they just disappear, and then they appear again another day. What am I going out of my head? Am I going mad? You don't. What do you do with this kind of information? I don't know. You go back, home? Do you talk? Do you run to a therapist? What do you do? So I think that we have to see there's a certain shock value in all of this, that, even though they've seen him alive and it says they're joyful and he says, peace be with you, it's like, and then he's gone. What do I do? Okay, you get the point, right? So Peter's probably up there thinking, this is just, I don't know what to do. I mean, I've seen him. I mean, I don't see him. He said to come up here, and I haven't seen him yet, and I don't know. But I do know fishing. I got to pay some bills. I think I'm going to go back to fishing. And it's sort of understandable, but it's regrettable, isn't it, right? It shows you that Peter's in a tough spot right now. And we're going to look at that a little bit more. He's got some stuff on his mind. Pretty serious. He's pretty discouraged with himself. He denied the Lord 3 times. And as far as I know, we don't know what that little private appearance with Peter was or how long it was. But boy, it's he's got to have that on his mind, too. He's disappointed in himself, and I denied him. So I don't know, but I do know fishing. So back they go. And again, this isn't some recreational fishing where they bring in fishing poles. They got their commercial nets out, okay? Now, here we are. But into this then comes Jesus. And he's standing on the shore. They're about 100 yards out. And he says, he says to them, little children, have you caught anything to eat? He kind of gives them a redeeming reminder, and the story you see in the gospel. So, he's going to tell them to cast their nets and they'll get plenty of fish. But let's look at the details. First of all, he calls them little children, paidios in the Greek. And you're like, well, wow. I mean, that's kind of demeaning. That's what we think of who just know English. But in other languages, and including the Semitic languages, the use of the diminutive, like, for example, the diminutive of Charles is Charlie. A lot of people, not all names in our language have diminutives, but James can be Jimmy, things like that, or Jim. But the diminutive is a sign of affection. It's not a demeaning thing to say. He's looking at full-grown men and calling them little children. That's not demeaning. It's endearing. It's affectionate. And so, you see, the Lord's not out there scolding them. Come back here. I told you not to get it. I'm going to burn those nets if you don't bring them in. Nothing like that. He calls them little children. We call anything to eat. Of course, the answer is no. Of course not. If you're out of God's will, you're not going to have any fruitfulness. And that's if you're lucky, that you get 0. If you're unlucky, you're going to go backwards and get penalties and problems of galore because you're doing what God doesn't, have for you. So again, you see the vision. Now, so he says, and then it says, cast your net. And this is a beautiful redeeming reminder. And so we have this kind of a regretful reversal of Peter. A beautiful redeeming reminder of the Lord comes next, and John comes to his senses first. It's the Lord, because all these fish are in the net, and suddenly this reminder, it's him. And Peter immediately, he tucks in his outer garment, and he dives into the water. I don't want to spend too much time on that. I simply say that Peter was wearing his inner tunic, which is kind of like a long t-shirt-like garment with sleeves and so on, and that's the inner tunic, probably about the mid-thigh length, and and then the outer garment would go all the way to the ground, and so he grabs his outer garment. He said, "What was that all about? Why dive into the water with that?" And the answer is, I think if you want to just spiritualize it, it's you don't want to show up to the Lord in your underwear, And of course, the garment is not just an outer garment that's respectful, but it's a sign of righteousness, right? And he wants to, be clothed in righteousness. So it's a symbol there, You don't just show up to the Lord in any old condition. Okay. Now he comes ashore, and as he comes ashore, the others are coming behind, bringing the net. We see a very astonishing scene. It's astonishing yet also troubling. Astonishing because here you have the second person of the Trinity. He who is God from God, light from light, true God from true God, one in being with the Father. Consubstantial with the Father. And he's cooking breakfast. It's kind of endearing, isn't it? You got the King of the universe cooking breakfast. So there's a charcoal fire there. There's some fish and bread on there. He says, "Bring some more of the fish." And basically he said to them, "Come have breakfast." It's beautiful. So he humbles him. He's just so humble, But there's something troubling about it, I'm going to guess, for Peter. It reminds him of another fire, that charcoal fire. Because if you read the Gospels, you'll see that as Jesus was at the courtyard of Caiaphas, the high priest, he's over there in one corner, and Peter's over in this other corner, and he's warming himself by a fire. Probably also a charcoal fire. By the way, wood was very costly. You didn't burn a lot of wood like you do today. Okay. So, a charcoal fire. And he's warming himself. Now look, that's incredible. The Son of God is on trial for his life. And Peter said, "Ooh, it's cold. I got to take care of myself. Warm myself." And so it's and then he denies the Lord 3 times, and the cock crows and before that fire. And it says in Luke's gospel that Jesus over here in the corner, as soon as that cock crowed, it says, "Conversus Dominus et respexit Petrum." And the Lord turned and he looked at Peter. I wonder what that look was. I'm sure it was a look of love. A sorrow, perhaps, but also mingled with love, of course. Anyway, and he weeps and he runs. And I think he's been carrying that ever since. And I'm going to guess he hasn't had much time to talk to the Lord about it, if any. Well, now that charcoal fire just reminds him again, so it's wonderful. And yet it's also terrible. The beautiful sign of God's humility, the Lord's humility, and yet also it reminds Peter of what he'd done, and also what he'd failed to do. Now, we next have what we may call a reorienting repast. I'm going to just use my R's. And the purpose of the breakfast, he's going to take this time to kind of reorient Peter and get him moving in the right direction. He's going back to fishing, time to turn him and the others around again and get them all back going in the right direction. But he has a conversation specifically with Peter, and I'm going to guess he's off to the side, maybe just talking quietly with Peter. And he asked Peter a series of questions, and he's asking you the same question and me. The Gospels are not spectator sport. When Jesus asks a question, you have to answer it. You don't just wait for what Peter says. But let's look at these questions. The first question he says is, Peter, do you love me more than these? So let's look at this first of all, than these. What is these? And some people think it means, the other men, but I don't think that's the context here at all. But rather, these are the fish. Do you love me more than these fish, Peter? No, so the context is he's going back to fishing, and now the Lord says, Peter, do you love me more than these? I need you, in other words, let's put in maybe something more modern. Do you love me more than your career? Do you love me more than your money? Your status? Do you love me more than your hobbies? So, in other words, am I really the highest love in your life, or do other things have precedence? It's a powerful question. And it requires an answer, but you better, it's got to have an honest answer. I think if most of us are honest, the answer is, I'm not sure, Lord. I spend an awful lot of time dealing with things of the world, and it preoccupies me. It has my priorities and my attention. Lord, I'm not so sure I can say that I love you more than these. Now, that's painful, but it's honest. And it's probably true for most of us to some degree. Hopefully it gets lesser as we go. We'll get back to that in a minute, but wow. Do you love me more than these? Answer. He's waiting. Me too. I've got to answer him. Do you love me more than your career? Do you love me more than your position or your popularity? Do you spend an awful lot of time, and you want to find out what you really value most? Look at what you spend your time and your money on most. Okay. That's the first question. Do you love me more than these? You spend the rest of your life answering that question. Now, the other thing is, when he says, do you love me, there's an interesting thing that doesn't really come up in the English translation because we only have kind of one word for love. But in Greek, there's different words for love, and two of the words are interplaying here, and it's very interesting if you look at it. So Jesus asked Peter, in the Greek text it says, Simon, agapos me, do you love me with agape love? Now, there were four Greek words for love, and at least four. I'm sure there were more, but the four more common ones. The first one would be eros, E-R-O-S, which is it's romantic love. It's the love of a man and a woman, a husband and a wife, and so on, for that aspect of love. And then there's storge, which is family love, loyalty, family love. And then there's brotherly love, phileos, or philes, that we get Philadelphia, the city of brotherly love. And then there is agapos, the highest love, a love above all. I love someone or something. In this case, I love God above all things, above all people, above my own self, my own life, anything. I love him. That's the love I have for God. Well, how you doing with that? Once again, it's just as hard as that other question. Do you love me more than these? Do you have the highest love for me above all things, above all people, than these? What's more important to you, the fish or me? Your career or me? Your money and paying off your bills or whatever? Or me? But he's using this word now. And what's interesting here is maybe for the first time in his life, Peter's going to answer kind of honestly. So when Jesus says to him, agapos me, Simon, Peter says, Kyrie, Lord, phileose, I love you with brotherly love. So why, if you ask somebody with a verb, you often will answer back with the same verb. So, Simon, agapos me, Kyrie, agapose. I love you with it. No, he doesn't. It's like if I go to a movie with you and I'm excited for you to see it, and I say, why didn't you love that movie? And you say, well, I liked it. there's a subtlety there, and I want to find out more about that. Now, some argue that's just a distinction without a difference, and okay. But I think the Holy Spirit put it there for us to notice. And the Lord's asking for this kind of perfect love, and Peter's given an offering back imperfect or a lesser love. Okay. Nothing wrong with brotherly love. But it's not the same as agape. Okay. Others argue, well, in the first century, the use of this Greek term didn't mean exactly like we mean it today. I don't, experts have lots of opinions, but once again, let's just go with this, okay? This is important. It's kind of sad, isn't it? Peter, do you love me with the highest love? Well, Lord, I love you with brotherly love. But it's also beautiful, because maybe for the first time in his life, he's being honest. Honest. Lord, I know what you're asking. I'm not going to lie to you. And I've been boasting. No, everyone else forsake you. I denied you 3 times. I'm not going to stand here and tell you something that isn't true, that you know isn't true. So if I were, to flesh out the text that way, and I am making assumptions. All right, now, the Lord doesn't say, well, ouch. No, he says, well, feed my lambs. So, Peter, I understand, and I still have work for you to do, and I'll take what I can get, and I've got work for you to do. Now, a second time the Lord asked him the question. Again, probably 3 times for the 3 denials. So the second time he says the same dialogue, Simon, agapas me, and Peter says, Kyrie, phileos, I love you with brotherly love. But the third time, the Lord changes. He says, Simon, phileis me, do you love me with brotherly love? And then Peter, it says, the text, Peter was sad that for the third time the Lord asked him, do you love me with the brotherly love? In other words, the Lord's kind of lowered it and come down to Peter's level. Lord, you know everything, he says. You know that I love you with brotherly love. As if to say only brotherly love. In a way, why do you torment me? We're just trying to be honest, okay? But the Lord's not tormenting him. We're just undoing the denials, and so Peter's being honest. How about you? How about me when we go to pray? 5 minutes of a prayer of honesty is better than 30 hours of a prayer of rhetoric that we don't mean. Just quoting stained glass words and other people's words. To speak to the Lord, to go before him humbly and say, Lord, I don't have my priorities straight all that. I mean, I'm getting messed up. I have more passion about the things of the world than about you and your kingdom. And I worry, and I'm all worked up about the world, and I'm not concerned for my relationship with you or getting my kids to you. Lord, I'm a mess. My life is so many ways disordered, and I need to be set straight, and I don't even know where to begin. And that's a beautiful prayer if it's honest. Get on your knees and just, say, Lord, I'm broken. And there's something glorious and beautiful about that, even if it's painful. And it doesn't mean we're just making light of it and saying, I'm stuck and I can't do it. It's more of just a cry from the heart that says, I want to be better than I am, but I'm not. Now, the Lord answers Peter after the third time. He says, I went again, feed my lambs, tend my sheep. So, you see, he said, I have something for you to do, Peter. I understand. But Peter, when you were young, he says, you used to go around as you wanted, but someday someone's going to tie you up and take you to where you don't want to go. And it says in the parentheses, he said this to indicate the death by which Peter would glorify the Lord. Now, even though that's scary and almost terrifying, in effect, he's saying, Peter, I'll get you there. One day, you'll say that I love you with agape love, O Lord. Agapo se Kyrie. Not now. Just follow me. I'll get you there. Now go with me 33 some years into the future, and we're on a hillside in Italy, just outside of Rome. It's called the Vatican hillside. It's kind of a cemetery, really. And upside down, tied to a cross, is Simon Peter. Tradition says he was crucified upside down because he felt unworthy to die the same way the Lord did. So he's upside down. Everything's topsy-turvy now, and he has to, in order to look up, he has to look down, which is a beautiful image for humility, right? And it's something he can finally now say, Kyrie, agapose. Lord, I now love you with complete total love. Above all things, above all people, above my very self, above my very life, I give you everything. You're all I want. Wow. So Peter got there. And we will too. You know, I've been at the bedside of many who have died. And I can say to you that I've seen and heard some of them say just that, my grandmother, when she was dying, she said, all I want is to go home and be with God. Why am I still here? And the Lord took her about a month later. And my father said the same thing. He said, all I want now is to be with God. My father my mother had died 2 years before. He sold the family house. All the things are gone. He's just got a little apartment. Then he fell ill. Been in a nursing home for the last 4 or 5 months of his life. And he's dying. And he says, all I want is to be with God. And he meant it. My grandmother meant it. It wasn't just you're saying that because you're supposed to. And the Lord took him. Within a week, he took him home. Well, in fact, it's the last thing my father ever said. His voice became paralyzed, his vocal cords, in the last week. And it's very moving. It's painful to see, but it's also beautiful. And the Lord will get us there too. Maybe He shouldn't have to take our deathbed, but maybe He will. But either way, we'll come to a point, if we're faithful, where we'll be able to finally say, agapose, Kyrie, I love you above all things. So for now, keep walking with the Lord. The Lord gave Peter a final instruction in today's gospel. Follow me. I'll get you there. Meanwhile, I got something for you to do. Let's go. Let's get it done. And so this is a beautiful, beautiful story of Peter's deepening conversion. And it would come some 33 years later when he could say that to the Lord. And for us too, it will come. It will come. Lord, I will it. Let it come.